On this edition of Independent Sources, Invisible No More, Caribbean immigrants make headway in their fight to self-identify on the U.S. Census.
It's not about being divisive. It's actually strengthening the African-American bloc in terms of actually saying, look, there is a whole other black diaspora, whether they're from Africa or from the Caribbean.
And high fashion, a Brooklyn designer rising to new heights on the fashion runway.
I really come from a music and a visual art background, and I just fused it with the fashion, with the shoes. So it is a little out there.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Garry Pierre-Pierre. The tide appears to be turning in a 6-year battle to get Caribbean immigrants to self-identify on the U.S. Census. Some advocates for Caribbean nationals are touting a recent recommendation from the National Advisory Committee on Racial, Ethnic, and Other Populations as a win for their cause. The NAC suggested that census officials should conduct more research and testing on the introduction of new identifying subgroups under the Black or African American category. Those would include Indo-Caribbean, Afro-Latino, or West Indian, to name a few. I spoke to Felicia Persaud of the Carib ID movement. She's been one of the main proponents of this movement since it began in 2008. Why is that important that Caribbean people be able to identify themselves in the census?
Well, absolutely, Gary. You know the battle we've been waging since 2008, and I'm hopeful that we can actually get the category. Now the committee has said they are actually endorsed the recommendation, so we're hopeful the census sees this as something they can put on the next form. But, you know, we have always said without the numbers, we cannot tell our story, our economic story, our political story in this country. And we've been here for over 400 years as a people. So I think it is extremely important, especially when you see Caribbean businesses being unable to grow, especially our media companies, because we have no numbers. We actually cannot go to corporate America and tell them how many people there are. Events are completely faltering and falling by the waysides. So there are just so many things. On top of it, there are the social needs within the community that actually needs to be addressed, and that cannot happen if you don't know where these people are and who they are. So you have mental health issues within our community, people who also cannot get the attention they need. So there are just so many things that come out of these numbers, and I think this is really, we have to slay this giant in order for our community to move forward.
Take us to the next step. Do what happens from there?
Well, right now, the National Census Committee, which looks at ethnic populations and race, has actually endorsed this. So they say, yes, we need an Afro-Latino and Afro-Caribbean, Indo-Caribbean, Caribbean/West Indian category to be added. And it's going to be, they've recommended under the African-American section. So they're going to put that there. But now the census, of course, has to act on this recommendation.
Generally, do they accept these recommendations, or do they have a history of what's their record on accepting?
Most of the times they accept these recommendations, and we're very optimistic, especially since the Latino community is also pushing for an Afro-Latino category. So we are going in sort of marching in with them, and so I think the census sees the light on that. So we're very optimistic about it, but you know, you never know. At the end of the day, they might say they just don't have the resources or it's too short a time, but we're waging a war now. We're starting up a change.org petition drive to actually make sure that people sign a petition that we can send to the Census Bureau and show them that we actually are behind this and we want to have this category for 2020.
I know you talked about all the social, political, and economic reasons why Caribbean needs to be counted. What else is important? Why is this an issue? Why is this so important?
Well, I think for me personally, I mean, I want to go on any form and actually be able to see what I am, which is a Caribbean. That's the only identity that I have as a person. I'm a Guyanese. I was born in Guyana. I'm a U.S. citizen. But my origin, my identity, just like the Asians are from Asia, Native Americans are Native Americans, Hispanics have a Hispanic origin. Caribbean, the region of the Caribbean is the only region that is left out of the census. The Caribbean and Africa, completely ignored. We're just pushed in under African Americans, which a lot of people cannot relate to because their cultural identity is completely different. And that has been our argument. Yes, there are Black Caribbeans, but there are also a melting pot of Caribbean people across the region. And I think that is what the Census Committee actually got. They finally understood it. Before they didn't get it. They just thought Caribbean people are Black. So what are you talking about?
Why were they resisting of this change? What was the argument?
Their argument was, well, people from the Caribbean, in their experience, that was their social experience, they're mostly Black people. So what is the big deal if they take Black or African American? They did not understand the Caribbean is such a multicultural melting pot of people. And so this is something that we had to explain to them, which is why they ended up also adding a Indo-Caribbean category as well as a subcategory under this line, which is, they actually finally got it.
But would I be able to check in Haitian American?
Yes, you will be able to write in also your country, and that is something that they got as well. So their recommendation is very detailed to the census, and almost all of the members, excepting for one person, I was at the meeting, and they all voted and accepted this. People from Middle Eastern Africa will also, North Africa and the Middle East will also be having their own category too. So they've also endorsed that as well. So we're very optimistic that all these different ethnic groups are going to finally be able to count, because that is really what matters. I mean, that is what the census should be doing.
But you know, there was a time not too long ago when Caribbean people didn't want to identify their country of origin because that was seen as being divisive. You know, you wanted to be Caribbean because you wanted to show strength in numbers. So there's that, in some ways, your efforts will dilute that whole argument or turn it on its head.
Well, no, I don't think it's about diluting anything, because people who are Black will also be able to say that they're Black, which is why you have Afro-Caribbean there. There's also the category, and it's coming under the whole African American banner. So it's going to be under the whole Black banner. So people who are Black are going to be able to say they're Black. But I think at the end of the day, the one thing that unites Caribbean people in this country is the fact that they were born in the Caribbean, or they have Caribbean roots. And that is something that goes beyond culture and race and everything else. So I think that is what we've been able to argue, and they finally understood it. And it's not about being divisive. It's actually strengthening the African American bloc in terms of actually saying, look, there is a whole other Black diaspora, whether they're from Africa or from the Caribbean, that is also part of the Black community here, but their needs and their culture is completely different, and that has to be understood. That has been our argument.
So if the recommendations are accepted by the census, when would we see these new categories in this form?
Well, it would definitely have to be for 2020, because that's when the next census is, and now I think the census is also saying they're going to go digital. So we're hopeful that that would help them. Because their arguments in the past has been, oh, well, the form is too long, they can't keep adding categories. So a digital form would definitely help this effort. And everybody, every community, Gary, recognizes the power of the census and their numbers, and everybody's on this fight. You know, when you've got Middle Eastern, Arabs, Africans, everybody is fighting for their own section there. They recognize they have to count, and that is what Caribbean Nationals, and I'm hopeful Caribbean can get that done.
Felicia Purcell, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it, Gary. Thank you. Always my pleasure.
Still to come on the show, using found items to make funky art and raise cancer awareness. Before that, Crystal Lowe has some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Governor Cuomo recently signed legislation making immigration assistance fraud a felony when clients are defrauded of more than $1,000. Al Jazeera America reports that the Immigration Assistance Enforcement Act was implemented to ensure that individuals, known as notarios, are held criminally responsible for defrauding immigrants. The crime often goes unreported because victims fear being deported. The new law calls for translation requirements and also ensures that only attorneys and Board of Immigration Appeals representatives can provide legal services. The Uptowner reports, doctors and advocates at Harlem Community AIDS Center, as well as other centers throughout the neighborhood, are trying to introduce a new medication that can reduce HIV infection by up to 92%. Doctors say that Truvada is not doing as well as they thought it would, in part because of the steep $1,300 a month price tag. A joint task force of doctors and advocates are hoping that increased education and their efforts to make the drug more affordable will get more people to try the medication. The Queer New York International Arts Festival kicked off this past week and will run through September 27th. The Lowdown reports that the festival is now in its third year and wants to broaden the traditional perceptions of what's considered queer. Festival director Svanomir Dubrovic says that he wants to ensure queer artists are respected and not marginalized. The Amsterdam News reports that the Dignity in Schools campaign is urging Mayor de Blasio and the Department of Education to adopt a new positive approach to handling school incidents in order to end the school-to-prison pipeline. The coalition of students, parents, advocates, educators, and lawyers believe that schools should not suspend first-time offending students who are deemed disorderly rather than disruptive. Those were just a few headlines from City's ethnic and community media. Independent sources will be right back after this.
Thanks for staying tuned. You know that old saying about one person's trash being another's treasure? Well, Wilhelmina Grant is taking that idea to another level. Grant takes found items like discarded oil pans of cars and turns them into art. Zafis Sloburn spoke to the artist about her work and her battle with cancer.
Wilhelmina, thank you so very much for being in studio with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's just start a little bit talking about the origin of how you got involved with these art assemblages, as you call them. Tell me a little bit about how you started those.
Well, I started about 6 years ago. I was looking at an art piece that was made by a friend, and I said, I'd like to do one. And he volunteered to show me how to collect the items, how to adhere them using different methods, using screws and nails and strong adhesives, how to find the right substrates, and then how to go around looking for items to put together. And so I did my first one, and I haven't looked back since.
All right, now you just said looking for items to put them together. From what I understand, you have gotten, you know, like a discarded oil pan from a car, something that literally fell off the truck when you saw it. I mean, what inspires you to like pick these random items up literally off the street in some cases, right?
Well, sometimes. There are things when I'll be walking and I'll look at it and I'll walk over it and then I'll backtrack and pick it up, because in the case of the oil pan that I used to make one piece, it looked like a profile to me. And I added some steel wool and some other items, and it looked like a person, and it ended up looking like someone I knew. So part of the artistic process is selecting or not selecting certain things. Certain things I'll pass by and I say, no, I don't need that. And other things I'm intrigued by. I said, that looks like an arm, or that looks like a nose.
One of the pieces, it's called I Used to Be a Spray Can, and I thought this was like really very fascinating. Tell me a little bit about it. I mean, it literally looks like it was a spray can.
It was. And that's an example of one of the pieces that I literally stepped over and then I backtracked and picked it up. I found that in Florida.
All right.
And I looked at it and it had movement to me. It looked like, the body of it looked like a woman doing like this. And I said, that has potential. So I picked it up in Florida last year and I brought it home, and I didn't do anything with it until early this year. But I knew it had potential, and a lot of the pieces that I will pick up, they'll sit in a box or in a bin for ages until they work their way into my art.
Right. So is the Sandwich Lady, is this part of one of your exhibits, part of the exhibit going on now?
That's in the exhibit, yes. And very many of the pieces in this exhibition have a substrate that is a cooking item or a kitchen item. So that used to be a chopping block.
Right.
And there are quite a few pieces that are made from a chopping block or a serving tray or something that was used in the kitchen, a bread tray. Yeah.
Okay. You're already in works of having another exhibition that's kind of going to be correlated with some of the work that you do with cancer awareness. You know, the audience should know that you've battled it twice.
I'm a 20-year survivor.
20-year survivor.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about that work that you're going to be doing.
Well, there's going to be another exhibition that's primarily focused on breast cancer awareness. I have a very large body of work that looks at that issue. I just dismounted a 22-piece exhibition from the African American Museum in Dallas, and that's a survivorship and memorial exhibition. But this exhibition that I will mount will be about early detection, about advocacy, and about these are just different assemblages that that talk to early detection and awareness in some way, and celebration of survivorship. That's important too, because not enough people believe that if you are diagnosed with cancer that you will survive. And there are many, many of us walking around in wonderful health, doing productive things. I have 20 years under my belt, and I know women who have been surviving breast cancer 45 years, 47 years, and numbers like that.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the next phase for you now that you've ended this, well, the current exhibit in Harlem is going to end in a few days.
Actually, it's going to remain, by popular demand, it will be in place for another month. So it will stay in that location until the end of October.
Wonderful.
And I will be concurrently mounting the breast cancer awareness exhibition at another restaurant, which also has requested the Kitchen and Curb exhibition for the spring.
Right. And which restaurant would that be, just for the
Billy's Black. It's in Harlem on West 119th Street.
Okay, all right. And it seems that your work really has kind of garnered itself a lot of attention and a following. I mean, when you started this, did you ever envision that you would kind of get that sort of response from people?
I had no idea. I had no idea. And quite a lot of the work that I've done comes to me just by some, I don't understand, some maybe spiritual nature. I get a lot of ideas. I'll wake up from a sleep and I said, this is what I'll do. I wanted to do a flag, and I was trying to make something that looked like the 50 states, but it was going to be a breast cancer awareness flag. And I popped up in bed at 3 in the morning. I said, baby bottle nipples. So I went to the Goodwill store and bought 50 baby bottle nipples, and they were checking me out and said, Miss, you can't return these. I was like, do you work in a nursery? No, I don't. You can't return it? No, it's okay.
Right.
And so things just come into my mind sometimes, or I may, just by juxtaposition, I may fling something in my studio, and when I go looking for it, it's next to something else that really pops. So things just come together sometimes.
Well, Wilhelmina, it seems that things have definitely been coming together, and I hope they continue to for you.
Thank you.
And thank you so very much for being in studio with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Grant's work is currently being displayed at the Home Sweet Harlem Bistro on Amsterdam Avenue in Harlem. She will also be part of an exhibit called Visions, Roots, and Rhythms that will run from September 28th to November 8th. Here at Independent Sources, we like to introduce our audience to the arts and culture produced by various ethnic groups that continue to make New York City their home. This week, we'll introduce you to a Nepalese filmmaker who's using films to get the word out about his community that has remained relatively hidden in the city. Nima Parim, thanks for being with us in the studio today. Nepal, where you're from, is an interesting country. There's a Nepalese community in New York. Let's start by talking about the Nepalese community here and basically where do they live, and just take us inside that community.
You know, they are spreading, but most of the Nepalese are living in Jackson Heights area, in the Sunnyside, in Woodside, those areas.
So basically, they tend to congregate where you have the South Asians community, like for instance, Bangladesh, Pakistani.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And tell us what brought the Nepalese here. Why are they migrating to New York?
The diversity visa of United States brought many Nepalese here. And it's basically, for Nepal, America is one of the countries they want to go. The reason for the education, for better economic, and then better living. Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things, part of the reasons why we're talking here, besides talking about the Nepalese community, is talking about this film festival, this indigenous film festival, that you and the other organization, Cineminga, are working on bringing Nepalese indigenous films to New York. And tell us about one of the films that you'll be showing this month and next month throughout New York.
I moved into the United States in 2011. Then, I see in the Nepalese community that Nepalese community was more kind of isolated, not interacting a lot with the different community from different part of the world here. So I was talking with Cineminga, with my friend Carlos, with Naomi, and then we thought, what can we put something over here so we can create a dialogue between the communities, between the migrant community, migrated communities, from different parts of the world. So we chose the community's film. The first film we shown was from the Tamang community called Analis. That's a short movie that was like awarded in Nepal in the festival, awarded as an audience choice. So we chose that movie because it talks a lot about the cultural part. The cultural part is like, when you migrate to places for better education, for better living standard, then you normally lose the culture. And the film was about that. So that was like, even though you migrate,
so
you
basically,
have to carry.
the film talks about the dangers of migration, where you tend to lose your culture.
Yeah, and it talks also about like how to kind of like how to balance in a new place.
Okay.
When you migrate, how to balance with the culture in the new place. You cannot bring everything, but you have to match with the new place.
Sure.
So the film was very, very like. So we chose that film. It talks about what is happening with the Nepalese community here, and that was very much like we had not only Nepalese community, we had from Colombia, we had from Russia, we had from Japan, different communities, and they say, wow, this is the same thing happening for our communities too. So that created the dialogue. Then the other movie that we showed was from Carlos Gomez, who is the co-founder of Cineminga. So he was in Nepal, and then he was making movie about the movement of the festival, this festival. So it was like, it was a very good documentation to see what is the progress, what is the development of the indigenous movie making in Nepal.
Okay. What do you want the Bangladeshi, the Latinos, African Americans, other communities to know about Nepalese and who you are? Because you mentioned how the Nepalese community was not engaging with the other groups in the city. So, and engaging with them, what do you want to show about the Nepalese community?
That's why we chose film, because film can show the culture, because from South Asia, the culture are very similarities, and then the issues that we've raised through the culture or through the film are very much similar, and then it's so showing the film like then that creates the dialogue, so we can discuss. So like the Nepalese community cannot be isolated, and then they are more involved with the Bangladeshi community, with South Asian, with the world, and we are trying for like to bring together.
In one sentence, tell me what people should know about Nepal and Nepalese in general.
I would say Nepal, the mountain country, beautiful mountain landlocked country. Among the Nepalese, I would say the friendly people.
All right. Well, you're a friendly guy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nima Parikh, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for giving me this time to tell a bit about the Nepalese community here in New York, and then about our film screening. Hope you will come, and then everybody who sees this show will join us to support us.
We certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Namaste. When we come back, stitching up thin-out stilettos for the runway. Finally from us, what's a fashion show without the shoes? Footwear is an important element used to complete an entire look. Unless, of course, the designer calls for models to walk barefoot. Last week, we profiled Muslim modest fashion designer Naila Limas about her latest collection. This week, Abby Ishola tells us about the Brooklyn-based designer John Ashford, who cobbled together that show's thin-out stilettos.
Hi, I'm John Ashford. I'm a shoe cobbler.
Talk a bit about your designs. They're a bit outrageous.
Yeah, I really come from a music and a visual art background, and I just fused it with the fashion, with the shoes. So it is a little out there.
So what inspired this current collection that you did, showing with these lovely ladies in their collection?
Really nature, things, trees, wind, water. that was the inspiration.
So what goes into making such a high heel? What is the highest heel you have in this show?
In the show, there's an 8-inch, but in the back room, there's an 11-inch, but it's not in the show.
And what goes into making an 11-inch heel?
Just experiment, just to see if it's walkable, just to, the wow factor. The average woman is not gonna wear an 11-inch shoe. At the same time, most of my shoes, they're one of a kind. I make them by hand, so they're like wow factor kind of shoes. So sometimes you just have to go and have fun, as long as they're walkable.
Who's walking in 11-inch heels?
I actually did a show Sunday for Fashion Week for another designer named Shadeth, and one of the models, who was a size 6.5, saw the shoe sitting on the table, and she said, I want to wear those. So we put them on, and she did the runway with the leather.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Where can ladies buy these shoes?
My website is www.authenticbyjohnashford.com.
And what's your price point?
They start at $400.
What made you want to collaborate with Amelina and Amira Creations?
Because they have very unique clothes. And, you know, it's like the Muslim community, and it's very different. And I thought, you know, it'd be nice to have some splashes of some John Ashford in there, just to bring it out even more. And it was really great to see it on the models, because you can look at a picture a million times, but when you see it on the models, I think it was a great combination.
Absolutely, great work.
Thank you.
You can see more of Ashford's designs on his website, authenticbyjohnashford.com. That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.